All right, everyone, welcome to our 18th rental roundtable. We've got Alex Kraft, the founder and CEO of Heave. Good to see you, Alex. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Good to see you, Kyle.
Uh, it's funny, we both started our companies, I think, within a month of each other, summer 2020. Is that right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when was it was at a blackjack table was our first meeting in Vegas?
Yeah, we started work. I think we both sort of started kicking the tires on this summer 2020, which, back then, COVID, it was just sort of what else can you do? Maybe start a company. And then May 2021, that was our first show, AED Summit in Las Vegas. And that's where I met you and played some blackjack together. I don't know if you made any money. I didn't make any money that night, but it was still fun to hang out that night. And here we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, when we started Heave, I thought COVID would be, kind of tailwinds for us, but it wasn't. I don't know if you had a similar experience or not.
Yeah, I mean, we started with online renting, so things were moving digital. It definitely, we saw a big spike that came back down and sort of has normalized and grown. But I think a lot of graphs I've seen around digital adoption and e-commerce, things like that, is essentially it's the same trend it would have been on 5 years ago. It just took a big spike, came back down. So in the scheme of things, I think we're all where we were supposed to be, but
Right.
we had a little bit of tailwinds initially with COVID. Well, I wanted to hear, just for everyone else who doesn't know you as well, about your story. I was interested in origin stories, particularly around tech startups, around how you started Heave. And I know you spent some time in the dealership world. So maybe just the audience doesn't know you, tell us about your background and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, good to be with you and your audience. So I started in the equipment industry in 2004, at working for a dealer. Didn't really know anything about the industry when I started. It was more of, for me, an opportunity to move to Miami as a young adult. And I started as an outside sales person. So it was, I guess I had a lot of companies look for the background of former athlete, competitive, get out and talk to people. And that's what I did. And I started to learn the industry and I really enjoyed it. What I liked the most about it was the customer base, blue collar nature, like real people. Construction companies and equipment owners are, many times like family businesses, second or third generation. And like I said, they're producing real things, like tangible output, companies that run equipment, pave roads, do utility work, are responsible for building housing developments, so I really connected with the customer base early on, and, had a short run of selling and renting equipment myself, and then rose through the organization, managed sales teams. I was the chief operating officer for the dealership for a 3-year period. And then right when COVID hit, we sold the company, and that's what led me to start our Heave journey then.
Yeah. So part of that experience obviously led you to starting Heave. What were some of the pain points you saw then that sort of gave you some intuition or understanding that there may be an opportunity here to build what you're doing now?
Yeah. So early on, when I started in the industry, you kind of pick up on certain talking points. And, from the earliest days, I remember, because I was trying to learn the industry, all the aspects of it, people would tell me how the heavy equipment space is very similar to auto. But one of the quotes was, but we're always 10 to 15 years behind. And the pain points that I saw early were, there really was no, and in my opinion, still today, for the most part, there's no real focus on the customer experience. It was always whatever you were trying to do for a customer, it was always hard on them. When they were trying to buy or rent equipment, it's kind of hard. It's not easy. At the time, you couldn't do anything online. You had to know who to call. They had to be available when you call. Or as a sales rep, really what you're told is, you just got to be in the right spot at the right time. You have to physically be present right when a customer actually needs to buy or rent something. On the customer service side, it's the same. Nothing's easy. And so that always stuck out to me because I found it hard to believe that with the amount of money that customers spend in this industry, that that's the experience. And to me, it was a very low bar. And so I always, kind of filed away that, the comparison to the auto industry, because you can see obviously how different the experience is for buying a car and everything around getting get a car serviced today. That fundamentally changed, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. And where people used to dread going to the dealership and how long it would take, that experience has completely changed. And so I just, that was kind of the backdrop for me. And I just knew, and I was confident that at some point, this industry would change towards, things becoming easier for the customer. My mindset was always the reason why it hasn't happened. That's, I'm sure, a question that you would get a lot too, trying to start a company in this space. Well, why hasn't anyone done this yet? My thought was always because this industry is largely unknown to the outside, that you would need people who had tremendous insight and knowledge within the industry to do it. And so that gave me the confidence that I could attempt to do it.
Mm. Yeah, that's definitely true. And the people who work in the equipment industry aren't necessarily the people who are building world-class software with that skill set. It's like really two different types of personas. And
of course,
we've obviously been able to bridge that gap. And I worked in automotive software companies for 7 or 8 years. I totally agree with that statement. In my mind, it was always 10 years behind. And you could see what's happening in that world, and you could start bringing some of those trends into the equipment industry. So when you go back to summer 2020, like I'm just always interested in like that first year journey, because I don't think where you are now is sort of your initial angle you entered the market in, right? As we've talked about, I want to hear about
it. Yeah, I don't know if I want to think back and remember those days, honestly. But no, so our original idea was, all right, because my background was sales and rental. Let's start a sales and rental marketplace. It was more like an Expedia type experience for a consumer. Like, all right, I want to buy or I want to rent a 3-yard wheel loader, submit. And then the idea was to get customers competing quotes and make it super easy. They didn't have to, because, in the prior experience, it was, I want to buy or rent a 3-yard wheel loader. I had to make 4 phone calls to get quotes. And so, I thought it was a really good idea. I thought it would, empower the buyers and the customers. The problem for us was we needed the suppliers to participate. And really they weren't on a large scale interested in making the process easier for customers. I thought maybe naively that, they would, because it would maybe give them access to new customers or more business. But unfortunately, it didn't play out that way. And it was a long, 1.5 to 2 year slog of, we make like incremental improvements. We would get new users, but we weren't gaining the momentum and the traction needed in that area of the business to keep going. And so it forced us to think about, is there a different area of value that we can offer? And service was something that kept coming up from customers. Like a typical customer interaction would be like, hey, what you're doing right now is pretty cool. But my real pain is in service. If you could help us there somehow, that would be really interesting. And so that kind of guided us and, created, the overused term of pivot. And so we decided to go head first in the service. And then once we did, the great thing for us was, our initial 1.5 years, there was a lot of internal conversation of, man, is this working? There was a lot of, I don't know, trying to talk ourselves into having something bigger than it was. Once we went to service, it was we knew immediately because we had magic moments for customers, and it was just kind of off and running.
I love that. I mean, that's all I've done is software startups. So I know, I actually think if you're not pivoting, you're probably just destined to fail, because reality of you nailed your product, market, segment, pricing from day zero is like almost zero, right? You have to, I mean, I can tell you our story. We pivoted too, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, and I've talked to you, probably a dozen times in the last 3-4 years. And every time, and I don't know when it changed, maybe a year ago when you went more into service, I could just tell in your excitement in your voice, you had something, because you can see the demand. You can tell your customers will tell you when you have something, and it's not pushing a boulder uphill nonstop. At some point you start to get momentum. And I can tell you guys have had that in the last year.
Yeah. And it's such there's so many really difficult things when you start a company. And I know that you probably share the same belief. But one of the hardest parts is you have to be stubborn. Yeah, because when you start a company, everyone tells you the odds, like it's not going to work. You are pushing a boulder uphill no matter what you do. And it's really difficult because you need a certain level of stubbornness. You need a certain level of just will to keep pushing. But how do you know when with the path that you're pushing is the wrong path? And to know, let's apply this same effort, but down this path. Like that to me is the hardest. But I think everybody has fork in the road moments, and but the great thing, like I mentioned, was when we went to service, it opened our eyes to like, oh, of course that was the wrong path, because we never had this feedback and experience from customers this early. So.
Yeah, the whole idea about pivot or persevere, that's the crux of the question, because you need grit in any path you take, but it's hard to know sometimes. We actually got a question from Dustin who chatted in. He said, "Hey, Alex, I was an early customer when he was more of a sales rental marketplace. How difficult was it for you to agree to scrap the original idea and start building something completely new?"
It was difficult. Ironically, the moment that I figured that we had to shut it down was after moments of success. As kind of wild as that sounds. So we had onboarded a couple sales reps from a John Deere dealer, and they came on, and within their first week they sold like a $240,000 wheel loader. We had a couple of guys do this, and so we were excited as a team, and we called them, and we were like, "Hey, this is great. It was a new customer, $240,000 sale." And we asked them like, "Hey, how many sales reps work for your company?" "Oh, we have 100. This is great. Can you help us? Let's get more of your sales reps on Heave. Let's do this." And the reaction was, "Well, if I don't sell something next month, we're going to cancel." And it was like this, like, holy shit moment where it's, at the time we were a subscription business. So we were charging $99 a month. Here was the best case scenario. Here was, $240,000 sale. So conservatively, that's $24,000 of profit for the dealer. It's probably a $5,000 commission for the sales rep. And they're squawking about $99 a month. So in a moment of success where everything worked out, they're pushing back on the value of our company. So that was the moment where I was like, "Oh no, this isn't going to work."
That's really interesting. Like a lot of people talk about in startups, you don't learn anything until you start charging customers, because everyone will say, "It's a great idea. I'll use it for free.
Exactly.
I'll pay it." Okay, it's going to be X $1,000 a year. Well, I don't know about it anymore, right? That's interesting. Like you were actually having success, but the willingness to pay wasn't quite there. You were like, maybe this isn't the right path. So you pivot towards the service side. What was those early data points that showed you that there was more traction, solving the maintenance issues?
Yeah. So the key thing with service, just like off the jump, was we could control our own destiny. So we were the ones that were serving the customer. With the prior model, we didn't own the equipment. It wasn't up to us. Like, our success prior was all around who the suppliers were, how quickly they would respond, what the pricing was to the customer. So just right off the jump, it's a completely different position. And one of the first jobs that we got was a fairy tale. And so we had a customer who kind of knew what we were doing here locally in Tampa. And he calls me and he's like, "Hey, I think I got a good test case for your service app. And he's like, I got a machine down, and the dealer came out and they quoted me a price. And he didn't tell me what the price was. But they couldn't get to it for like 2 to 3 weeks. And, it's kind of a dire situation. And, he had nothing to lose at this point. So he's like, how do I do this? And so we walk him through, download the app, put in the request. So puts in the request, a technician answers it right away. And he's out there the next morning. And the technician looks over the machine, advises them that, hey, I know you were told that you need to replace all these components, but that's not necessary. The guy was a 20-year experienced technician. So he fixes the machine within the same workday. So it's done within 8 hours. We invoiced the customer, I think it was like $1,500 for a day's worth of work. And it was working. And so the owner of the company calls me the next day. He had already gotten the invoice. And he's like, they quoted me $30,000 to do that job. And he's like, not only that, but it would have taken 2 to 3 weeks for them to get to it. And he's like, I think you got something. He's like, we're going to keep using this. And so like literally within our first month, that was like one of our first experiences. So like, I think it's helpful too. I'm glad that Dustin asked me that question because, here was the experiences that I could compare, right? Like real quickly, the customers were ecstatic, with service. Whereas the customer of a dealership was pushing back about $99 with the prior model. So once, and that's a great story to highlight because it was early, but that kept happening, with service. Customers were just not, I mean, the easiest way for me to also explain it was with our first product, we were solving maybe for an inconvenience, whereas with service, we were solving a true pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it was like, oh boy, I think let's like put the gas pedal down and let's go get it with service.
Yeah, it's the whole vitamin and painkiller. You'll pay $99 for a vitamin, but for a painkiller, just name the price. I need help right now.
Yeah.
The thing we have a Slack channel in our company called Customer Love Actions, and we track that because I think it's important. That shows you're on to something. And that experience you had with the, $1,500 service was fixed that day, that was a love action that you probably didn't have. Maybe you had a couple of those in your first model, but on your new model, you're getting those daily, right? I think sometimes people can miss that. I think it kind of go, your initial thesis, right? That the customer was not served well generally in the dealership world. And you were sort of on that path to sort of navigate that. And once you found those love actions, like that's when you knew you had the company you wanted to build.
Yeah, completely agree. And you're right when you said before, like, a lot of startups, they look at how other startups start, and it's like, but and everyone wants to do free, right? I want to get my product in people's hands, but that is the moment in the line in the sand is like, are people willing to pay? And when customers are really happy and they're paying you, like with service, then that was the sign.
It takes time, it's taken us time to sort of navigate that. Our initial thesis was online renting. We had the same experience. It was working, but it wasn't the wow. And then customers were like, hey, can you build a full rental system for us? Right. So we built the integrated back end, the whole thing. And then it was like, then we started lighting it up. And it took a couple of years to figure that out. And I think the stats I read for vertical software companies, 91% don't make it 3 years. So the challenge is it's going to take a couple of years to sort of find your place in the market, but you also have to survive in the meantime. And it's just sort of this race. And I think we both made it out 3-4 years. So we've sort of crossed the chasm a little bit. We're not done, but I love hearing the origin stories because people are like, oh, Heave, it's like Uber for heavy equipment. I had that idea. It's like, well, you didn't have that idea. You got in the market and you learned and you did the work and it came, now it's an obvious idea, but like, that's not how it started. Right. And I think it's interesting, like hearing the true story behind the company.
Yeah, it is. It's fun to like think back because we made like 5 different changes with the first product. Like we weren't just sticking to it. Like I mentioned, like first we went to dealerships, and then we pivoted to sales reps and then sold subscriptions because I felt like they were the ones who were most motivated to move the equipment every month. So we're trying to cater to them. But yeah, it's and we made plenty of adjustments with the product, but so we definitely exhausted all angles.
Yeah.
We're not, sitting around. So, but yeah, thankfully like I said, we can control our own destiny it's interesting, like what you said too there, I really like is that you guys in a way, we made a transition from, we were pitching in the beginning. We were trying to sell to those companies. And it's so much different when customers are like, hey, can you do this? Can you help me here? Completely different position. And that's the position that we love being in.
And I think the other thing you sort of intuitively feel is there's a vacuum. You used to be just constantly pushing, and then you sort of you nail the product market fit, and you're getting pulled. Mm-hmm. People, you're getting pulled into the market, right? That's the other thing.
Yeah, and what has happened to us too, because the dealership I worked at, we were what primarily is referred to as a quote dirt house. Mm-hmm. So we really just did dirt equipment, so like excavators, loaders, trucks. And so that's kind of how we started with the service side, because that's the business that I knew. And what happened quickly was customers would use us and they would go, hey, can you guys fix on-highway dump trucks? I don't know. So then we would just ask the technicians in our network, like, oh yeah, I can fix on-highway dump trucks. Can you fix cranes? I don't know. Let me ask. We're fixing cranes. We're fixing. So I looked the other day, we fixed 60 different brands of equipment in our first year. And it's something that I wouldn't have even dreamed of because I just didn't know. And so like we're fixing like little Vermeers and we're fixing Cat 777 mining trucks. It's pretty wild how quickly, but it's all from customers just being exposed to them and just asking us like, hey, can you guys do this? So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. So here we are in March 2024, 3 years after we played blackjack and we both have pivoted, but we're still here. So I think maybe just for the audience, explain what Heave is today, how they can use it. And then this ties into a question we got from the audience as well as,
sure.
Do you think your platform would work well for a startup rental company that may not have a lot of service resources early on? So maybe just, again, broad view of what Heave is, how it works, and how that could work for a startup rental company.
So I sometimes say Uber for field service because that, to me, I think gets it across the fastest to people. But really what I like to describe us as is on-demand field service. So on-demand, I think it's helpful to start with like what I believe the legacy field service experience has been. Dealer field service is call in, ask for service, and then you don't know. You don't know when someone's coming. The best way that I equate it to is I describe it as it's like I go to the deli counter in a grocery store or a deli and I pull a number and I have no idea who they're serving next. I just know that I have number 87. I don't know when they're coming. And so what we wanted to do was create the opposite. So we let customers always pick the technician they want. And so customers go on our app. I have a Cat 950 wheel loader. It's down with these def codes. I need service. Boom. Request goes out to all the technicians, and then they can confirm if they want the job, when they can be there. And so the customer always gets to see available options that are close to them, and then they get to decide who they want. And we want to empower the customer because what we see is not everybody has the same criteria. Some customers pick who can be there the fastest. Some customers pick the cheapest option. Some customers pick a technician that they had a ton of experience with. So even though that person might not be able to be there for like 3 days, hey, Robert has done 40 jobs for me. He does great work. I want to pick him. So we don't assign or match. We let the customer decide every time. And, because some jobs, like I said, 3 days from now, it might be a PM service and it's not urgent. So, hey, I can just schedule a PM service for 3 days from now, or, it might be a basic hydraulic leak and I can still run the machine. So I might pick somebody 2 days from now. But the customer always gets choice. And that's one of the defining characteristics of what we do.
Choice, and you mentioned transparent pricing, and then like direct communication, like all those things. So it's not necessarily Uber where you put in your your route, and the price is locked in, and you get a driver
Right.
they assign, right? You have some choice on the sort of like the products you could choose within Uber. There's maybe more like I use Rover a lot for our dog. You know,
Mhm.
you can sort of see the different sitters, different rates. You see the location, reviews,
Right.
and you may want to pay more or less based on what you're looking for. And
Exactly.
so it seems like a similar model to that.
Definitely. And our goal is, when I say on demand, is that the customer typically knows within 10 to 15 minutes, hey, I've got this booked. I know who I'm getting. I know what the price is going to be, and I know when. Hey, I know they're going to be here tomorrow morning, or I know they're going to be here tomorrow afternoon. And so it's basically an appointment, which has not existed in the past.
And then go back to the question from the audience. How would a rental company potentially leverage Heave and use Heave in their business?
So, we started serving customers, and it's interesting. Like, we had talked to some rental companies early, but it's all about timing. Maybe we weren't proven out yet. But we've actually just started doing a lot of work for Sunbelt, and I would imagine that smaller rental companies could see a ton of synergy with us as well as Sunbelt does. So the way I understand it, because I was at a dealership, I wasn't a true rental house, but I would imagine that if I'm a rental company, I have a certain amount of technicians, probably not nearly as many as a dealership. And, I rent equipment out to customers every day, but equipment breaks. And so I probably don't have enough field technicians that I can get equipment up for my customers fast enough for what their expectation is, because customers renting equipment from a rental company, they needed to do a job. Like, they can't afford any downtime. They're not paying for downtime. And from what I understand, rental companies' method of operation is swap outs as opposed to fixing on site, which can be very expensive. And so I think we can help ease that burden of, instead of swapping stuff out, like getting somebody on site quickly and getting that piece up and running so the customer, their downtime is minimized.
So you imagine Sunbelt, they could swap out a piece of equipment, or they could contact you guys, get someone on site that day to fix it, which is ultimately better for the customer, because I imagine it'd be faster and better for Sunbelt, right? Because they don't have to swap equipment. They're still going to have to fix it. So you might as well the problem right then.
Yeah. And we can help on both sides, right? Like, let's say the swap out was the fastest solution for whatever reason. It's like you said, still has to get fixed back on the yard. So they could always hire a guy through Heave to fix it on the yard, because I would imagine for certain rental companies, there might not be like out of sight, out of mind, right? So if I swapped it out and it's on the yard, and now I have a yard piling up with equipment that still needs to get fixed, which can't be rented until it's fixed, booking somebody, because we see this with contractors. One of the really cool value props that we provide is, because we're brand agnostic, is, we've had a ton of service calls where it'll start with the customer putting in a request for an excavator or whatever, and guy gets out to the job site, fixes the excavator, he's on the job site, and the customer will be like, hey, while you're here, can you look at that John Deere wheel loader? Hey, and then after that, hey, this Komatsu dozer. And so where they would have had to involve like 3 different dealers, they now have one mechanic who can fix all of it. And so, and that's one travel charge. Like, that's not all these separate calls. And so that's really where you start to multiply this cost savings for customers too. So I see where that could really benefit rental companies, because they have, I don't know of a single rental company other than like a dedicated cat dealer that has one brand of equipment. They have wide variety, product portfolio, all these different brands. And whereas like somebody like us, we could fix all of them.
And for the rental company, you just send someone out one time, they can fix everything on site. We actually had someone chat in, whether dog sitting or fixing a $500,000 machine, the model works. So managed marketplace. I want to talk about the sourcing part on the technician side. I think we've talked about, I worked at Uber. My role at Uber was particularly sourcing drivers, using promotions and incentives, because Uber like any marketplace, supply and demand, they were always short on supply. We did not have enough drivers. And that was a big challenge, was finding drivers at the right place in the right time in the right market. So it's not that, you know, it's in these essentially these hyper local markets, right? It's like, you operate, right? You're not nationwide necessarily right now, but you operate in certain markets. Right. Have you thought about the technician piece? That's really the key here. At the end of the day, those are the people doing the service, doing the work. Have you gone about sourcing the technicians, which is obviously like the crux of the business you're building?
Yeah, it's it really helped. This is one of the areas where it really helped that I had experience in the industry. So just being here locally in Florida, knowing customers, like when I started, it was talking to a lot of customers, asking them about independents that they've used, and they would share them with me. Just being working at a dealership, knowing mechanics, I would talk to mechanics, knowing, because I like when I explained our journey and how customers were asking us to go into service. Like if I rewind even further, in my last 2 years at the dealership, I started noticing really talented dealership mechanics leaving. And my assumption was at the time, because there's scarcity with the labor pool, was, oh, well, the cat dealer hired these guys away from us and they paid them a little more, because that's what everyone says. And when I started investigating it while working at the dealer, what I was told was, no, he went independent. And so I was like, interesting. I didn't know about that. Let me learn more about it. And so I had line of sight to this while I was still at the dealership, where really talented mechanics were leaving because it was the economics of it. Dealers pay X, mechanics know that they're billed out at Y, and they start to kind of do the math, like, hey, what if I went out on my own? I could triple my earnings. If I'm a really good mechanic, why wouldn't I entertain that idea? And so I started noticing how these guys would start and they would go to the same group of customers that we were dispatching into as a dealership. The customer knows who this person is. Hey, I've worked on your equipment for the last 5 years. I do good work. Just hire me, one-off. And so I knew that these guys existed. And I just, in the early days, like everybody, like you did, I'm sure, when you said at Uber, is you just pound the pavement and you talk to as many people as you can and you build that network, at the smallest level that can, start the business. And that's what we did. And to where we got off the ground. And then as more business came through our platform, it attracted more mechanics. Because you're always going to get, especially in this business, with a new idea, there's going to be a lot of skepticism. And I'm sure there was plenty of mechanics who, they would see what we were doing, they'd see it on social media or they'd hear about it, but they were hesitant. Like, I want to see how this thing evolves. And then that's where the importance of customers comes in, because they all know the names of these big customers. And so as soon as they started seeing these logos come in, it gave us credibility. And it's like, oh, well, if that customer gets their equipment repaired through Heave, must be legit. And then we started getting word of mouth from both customers and other technicians. We'd have technicians who would source jobs through us and they would tell their friends. It's not this competitive thing, because they all know that there's plenty of work to go around. There's only X amount of mechanics. So they weren't like, hey, I'm not going to tell my mechanic friends about this because that's less work for me. They all know that there's plenty of work. And so initially pounding the pavement early, just utilizing connections, but then we got going to where we were getting tons of word of mouth to bring in other people.
And I imagine for the technicians, this is probably really good for them, right? Because I imagine, I think we talked about, they're not making 10% more on Heave. It's 2X, 3X, right? Like they're capturing the full value of their work where
exactly
they're not necessarily doing that.
Yeah, there's a few huge benefits. It's capturing true market value for their services. They don't take a discount to work on our app. Like, we don't force a choice of like, hey, your normal rate is this, and then for a Heave job, you have to take less. No, they get their full rate. We just add on top of their rate. So they don't have to make a tough choice there. We pay them faster than what a traditional customer would pay. And so we offload a burden of like accounts receivable for them as well. And, it's flexibility, it's choice of what jobs they want to take. Like I said, we don't match. So they have to opt into the jobs that they want. And so, if it's too far for them to travel, they won't opt in. Or if it's a brand or a product that they're not really comfortable with, they won't opt in. And so it really, and I always tell technicians this, and I mean it, is that Heave can be whatever they want it to be. And so we have some technicians who will do 3 jobs a month. They'll just use it when they have a slow time. We have others who I looked last month who did 20 jobs. So we're probably their main source of work. We don't care. Like I said, there's no contract, there's no obligation. We don't charge technicians like a subscription fee or anything. So it can be whatever they want it to be.
And so that gig economy, that again, it's not new in the equipment world, but it is new in the equipment world. It's not new outside of it, right? Uber's been 15 years. But it gives people flexibility. I'm curious on your side, from the marketplace side, it's always hard to build a marketplace because you got to build both sides of the marketplace. Where are you guys seeing the more challenge right now? Is it the supply side of technicians or on the demand side? And it may change by market, I imagine too, but where's the big right now?
It's always going to be evolving, right? Because you're always trying to balance both sides. In terms of, we have enough supply of technicians that we can continue growing our customer base by 2 to 3 times. Like, we're in a great spot with technicians. And that's partially because we've chosen to really stay in our Texas and Florida markets today. Like, if we were in 6 other states, then we probably have a real problem with technicians, but we're being very purposeful about where to go, because we want to have X amount of technicians in a market before we really tell customers that we're there.
It's interesting because we talked to a lot of rental companies who are short on labor and technicians. You guys have built a great product to the point that technicians are not the challenge right now. You have people who want to do the work. That's the harder point in my mind, right? And I think that's your experience in the product and the pay you're able to offer, which is really what the market's able to offer. That's really encouraging because I imagine that would be a challenge if you hadn't been able to solve that.
Yeah, and we have some aggressive plans going forward. Like, as we scale, and I'm sure you have these conversations internally with you guys too, like, we're going to hire someone who will be just solely dedicated to recruiting technicians. And we have a couple candidates who are technicians. So, who better to do that when we go into certain markets? So, it's all coming together too. So when we decide to really aggressively open new markets, we'll have, a more structured approach than just the single founder trying to talk to technicians in every market.
Yeah, you can only go so far. So you guys in Florida, Texas. I think I saw you guys are maybe going to Atlanta. Is that right? Like, what's the in all the country? Where I guess where's next in 2024?
So we're looking at right now Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville. Really good construction markets. Somewhat close to Florida. That's our immediate plan that we're working on hiring. We have a large contingent of mechanics who have downloaded the app who are kind of ready to work, and so that helps determine what areas we go to. So we're always monitoring that part, and also customers. We've done work in 8 other states outside of Florida and Texas, but we're not officially there. It's been more of, we've had customers who have worked in Texas and Florida, used us, loved it, and then they've asked us. So it's been on a per customer basis. Like, we work in Indianapolis of all things, and it's just because Dallas area customer loves the experience. It's like, hey, I'm working in this mine outside of Indianapolis. Can you help me there? And everyone's like, sure, for you, we'll do it. And so it's always, there's not like this, not everything has to be connected, contiguous. It's more of like assessing, once again, that where do we have supply, and then where is demand the strongest? Where are customers really asking us to go? And that's what will determine where we go next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your customers will pull you. I guess the last topic I want to talk about is sort of the future of the industry. We talked about independent technicians as potentially the path forward. I'm curious on your thoughts on where the equipment service industry really go in the next 5 years, 7 years.
Yeah, I think you're a perfect person to talk to about this because when people have asked me about this in the past, I've tried to draw a similarity to another industry and they kind of look at me sideways. I, for some reason, and maybe it's, because we're a tech company, right? So now I deal with software engineers. I think there's a strong similarity between equipment, heavy diesel mechanics and software engineers. And so where we're going, heavy duty diesel mechanics are highly skilled. I briefly touched on what I think is a main driver of people going independent is the economics. If you're highly skilled and there's a scarcity of your role, to me, why would you work in the status quo where you're basically working for a discount? Like software engineers, we've all seen this huge spike in people pursuing that profession. And so why is that? It's clearly, to me, a couple things. We all know that there's going to be high demand for that job in the future. Everyone teaching people to code because the technology sector, but also because it's a well-paid career. We employ software engineers. I can tell you right now, we don't pay $40 an hour for their services, like some equipment technicians get paid. And so that's why I equate it to that, is that software engineers are paid a premium. There's high demand for their services. To me, there's high demand for heavy duty, really good diesel mechanics. There's very few of them. There's less people entering the field. Well, I think that flips when they realize that they can, and there's a path to making truly what the market will pay, which I think should be $150K plus, $200K plus a year. So I see strong similarities to the software engineering field. But
I do for sure. I think it's even probably more pronounced for the technicians because with software engineers, that's now a global thing. You could hire engineers in South America, India, Eastern Europe, and that'll drive the rates down, more competition. But like if you're fixing a piece of equipment in West Texas, you have to be in West Texas, right? And actually that shrinks the potential supply, which ultimately makes the technicians even more valuable. And I totally agree. I think if you're a dealer, you should be mindful about that because that really could change how the service part of your business. If this model really takes flight, which it seems inevitable, because if you're a technician and you now have opportunities with Heave to make 3 times more money for the same amount of work, control your own schedule, decide who you work for and when you work. Yeah. It's hard to imagine that's not the new model moving forward.
Look, when I started in 2004, people were talking about how there was a shortage of technicians. They were saying back then, hey, we look at how many of our technicians are of this age. They're going to be retired. We're going to lose that knowledge, blah, blah, blah. Every year they've been talking about it. And I think it's just so silly to me for the industry. They keep talking about it. And they're like, why do people want to become technicians? And it's like, okay, let's peel it back. You're saying, hey, I can't believe more people don't want to enter this field to go do hard physical labor, to work in Florida and Texas, Arizona, in the middle of July, being outside, working for 8 hours under a machine and for $27 an hour. I can't believe people don't want to do that. Like, can we be serious? Like, it's highly skilled work. Like, it's ridiculous to me. And that's why nothing has changed in the 20 years that I've been in the business. It's just nobody wants to talk real. They don't want to be adults and talk about like the true reality of it.
And the market will set those prices for them. And it's sort of cutting out the middleman in a sense. And the technicians are going to earn what they deserve in this new world.
Right.
My last question is like long-term, where does the training come from all this? Because traditionally, I imagine the technicians have been trained by the dealerships. If they start becoming more independent, how do people get trained up in the first place?
Yeah. What's interesting is, so there are certain OEMs that offer training for independents that exists. And also OEMs offer training for customers. Like And that's a critical piece. Like many of the large customers have their own technicians. And so OEMs extend the same offer of training for those customer technicians. So there is not a monopoly on training that is just for dealerships. So I think as we continue building scale, building our brand, building our credibility, I think there's definitely a path for us to partner to where we can access the most latest training for our technicians. Because look, OEMs, they care about selling more machines into a territory. And if customers have negative experience and are waiting too long and their machine is down, it impacts their decisions to buy more from that brand in the future. And so I do think there's alignment. Like, look, the reality today is that on the average, it takes dealers 2 to 3 weeks to get a field tech to the majority of their customers. And there is a logjam. And so, I think we relieve a lot of pressure from that system. And so it's better for the overall ecosystem for us, to participate and to help. Because how can you be mad at your customers for finding a solution when you can't get to them for 2 to 3 weeks? How dare you? You should wait. You should get in line and wait the 3 weeks. So I think there's a path forward. I think it exists today already in certain circumstances. So we'll just continue to build the credibility of what we're doing, and then partner with people to get trained.
Does Heave University ever exist one day where you guys are training technicians yourself?
Definitely. I mean, initially, what really helps is that, and I can't believe I didn't make this point already, is that the existing independents in our network, 9 out of 10 of them used to work at a dealership, so they've been trained. These are not, for the most part, not like self-trained. These are, I started at a dealership, I worked there for 10 plus years, I decided to go independent. So they have that core base under their belt. And it's about, for us, Heave University is about a continuing education. We're not sending out, like, customers are not booking somebody who's been a tech for 2 years through us. They're booking 10 to 15, 20 plus year experience with OEM technicians.
Yeah. Then they're paying for that service. They're paying for the value, not trying to get the
exactly.
cheap. What's the long-term plan for Heave? 5 years? Will you guys is you plan to be nationwide? Is that the hope? All 50 states?
Hopefully 3 years from now. Yes.
3 years.
That's the idea. And that's our unique opportunity, is to be the only nationwide service provider for all brands. Once again, brand agnostic. It does not exist because OEMs have dealers, and each dealer has a specific territory, and so we'll be able to fix John Deere, Cat, Komatsu, you name it, in all 50 states, hopefully 3 to 5 years.
All right. Something to look forward to. Well, this is recorded, so I'll send a notification on my calendar in 3 years, and we'll check in to see who you guys are. You're on the clock.
That's all right. Hey, keep putting the pressure on, like, I'm sure you have no shortage of pressure on your plate too. Yeah.
I mean, but there's all those, like, I guess, studies that if you say something publicly, you're like 10 times more likely to do it. So now it's on the records, 3 years, 50 states. Yeah. Well, so I guess that's March 2027, which is seems like a long way away, but
it is.
Alex, thanks for coming on here. Hopefully next time I see you, we can get some more blackjack and maybe have some better luck than the first time, but
yeah.
I appreciate you coming on. Awesome journey, and it's fun to see what you guys are doing. Like I said, we've started within probably a month or two of each other, and it's cool to see all the progress you've made. And I know you're proud of what you guys are doing, and still have a lot more that you guys are going to achieve.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the Rental Roundtable and talk about our story. It's been fun, and it's been good to get to know you. It's always helpful to just be able to talk to other people in your situation and just exchange notes, because it's very lonely at times, and not many people understand what it takes and what you go through every day. So I appreciate all of our conversations as well.
For sure. It's all about community, and excited to root along for you guys, and we'll like I said, we'll be in touch.
All right, sounds good.
In our future.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you, Alex.
Take care. See you.
Bye.